case-based discussion we are trying for the first time on soft tissue sarcoma on online platform. So far, we had been doing the seminars and the journal clubs, which had been good. But I don't know how this soft tissue case-based discussion will go on. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk a brief about soft tissue sarcoma. Will take 2 minutes, and then we'll go to the case straight away. Soft tissue sarcoma, as you all know, is less than 1% of all adult tumors. In pediatric population, the incidence is high, and it's about 7% of all pediatric tumors. There are more than 25 distinct histological types of malignant neoplasm cell, and all these distinct histopathological types behave differently. So even though they have been clubbed together into one group, each histological subtypes has a different behavior, different biological outcome, and some of them have a different treatment. For example, GIST. They are staged in a similar manner. The treatment algorithms are very complicated, and because it is something which is not very commonly seen, there is a lack of familiarity in management of these diseases. If you look at the type of sarcomas, you will find that approximately 20% are undifferentiated, followed by liposarcoma, leiomyosarcoma, fibrosarcoma, rhabdocaposis, MPNST, and synovial sarcomas. I'll be just touching on the TNM. The change that has been made in the TNM classification in 8th edition is that the tumor size now has been classified into 4: T1, T2, T3, T4. It was earlier as T1 and T2 only. And T1 is less than 5 centimeter, T2 is 5 to 10 centimeter, T3 is 10 to 15 centimeter, and T4 is greater than 15 centimeter. Grade is low, moderate, and high. And N1 and M1 is presence of regional nodes and distant metastasis respectively. If we look at the stage grouping, this is also very, very easy. Grade 1 tumors, which are N0, M0s, are stage 1. Grade 2, 3 with T1 is stage 2. T2 becomes stage 3A, and T3, T4 tumors, moderate as or high grade, becomes stage 3B. And if there is a node positivity or metastatic disease, it becomes an M1 disease, becomes a stage 4 disease. So it's a very simple, straightforward stage grouping in sarcomas. So I have divided this case-based discussion into scenarios, and the first scenario is extremity soft tissue sarcoma. So this is a 35-year-old male presented with a 12 into 8 centimeter progressive swelling in the groin area, 6 months duration. There was no pain or restriction of movement, and there is no other contributory history. So now I'm opening the discussion. This is my question to the PGs: imaging first or biopsy first? Now you can unmute yourself and answer if somebody wants to answer on this.
Imaging must be done first, sir.
Biopsy first, sir.
So we have two answers. One says imaging, one says biopsy.
Imaging first, sir.
Imaging first, sir.
Imaging first, sir.
So those who are saying imaging first, can you justify why imaging should be done first?
Sir, because if biopsy is done first, then it can lead to tumor seeding. So soft tissue sarcoma can
bleeding, which will seed in.
And adequate plane of dissection cannot be done during surgery. If biopsy is already taken, it would disturb the plane of the.
Yeah, the correct answer is imaging first. But the reason for doing the imaging first is that sometimes the biopsy can lead to a hematoma formation. And otherwise also there could be a needle track. Sometimes you may plan to do an incision biopsy, which may interfere with the plane and imaging. So because the biopsy procedure can interfere with the imaging, it is always done first. Now the second question is, what is the ideal mode of imaging, CT or MRI?
MRI.
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 Sir.
So if you read the literature says there is no difference as far as the CT or MRI is concerned. There are certain situations where MRI is better. There are certain situations where CT is better. Like for an abdominal imaging where there are organ with the gas, MRI is shown to be poor, and CT is supposed to be better. In the extremity, the CT and MRI are almost equal, and there is not much of a difference between the two imaging modalities. So the answer to the question is that CT and MRI both are equally good, and either can be done.
This is Dr. Ankita. So
Yeah.
in this particular situation, as it is extremity, so MRI is better in this
Extremity MRI is better because the plane or the muscles which are seen can be much better seen in an MRI compared to a CT scan. But when it comes to vascularity or the delineation of the vascular structures, they are better seen in a contrast enhanced CT than in an MRI. Otherwise, you'll have to do an MR angiography separately. So both has its own pros and its own cons. There are certain other modalities which people have tried. 3D, 4D ultrasound with volume rendering people have tried, and it is not a very popular technique right now. But some centers where 3D, 4D ultrasounds are available, people are regularly doing it. And angiography or MR angiography is indicated when the tumor is supposed to be very close to the vessels, or wherever you want to, you think that the tumor is very vascular and you want to find out where the blood supply is coming from. So again, to the PGs, what kind of a biopsy? A core, incision, or excision?
Sir, image guided core needle biopsy.
Core needle biopsy.
Image guided.
Image guided core biopsy.
So the person who is saying image guided, why does he want an image guided biopsy in such a big lesion?
Sir, we need to understand the needle trajectory. Should be incorporated.
If you have a 12 by 8 centimeter tumor, why do you need an image guiding?
Because STS is in a heterogeneous tumor. There are a lot of areas where there will be a necrosis. So we don't want the false report. Like it should be directed at a representative tissue.
Because sir, we need the short route that we can do. Short route of the biopsy.
Ajay, this lesion is just under the skin. It's a groin tumor.
So, I'm a pathologist. Can I answer this question?
Sure.
So actually, because once you have already done the imaging, you know whether the large tumor has necrosis or not in it. So I think it's like without just a core biopsy without any image guidance is much. It's I think equally good. Anything will be good.
Yes, you are right. So you are the pathologist, so it's important that you stay with us because there are a lot of pathology questions coming in, and
yes,
we'll need you throughout the discussion.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So the ideal biopsy in this situation is a core needle biopsy, but there are situations where you do a incision biopsy or an excision biopsy. If you look at the distribution, the sarcomas which usually arise in the groin and extremity, it is always says that the biopsy should be done before you decide upon treatment, because it will become clear when I'll come to that how we go about the treatment algorithms are discussed. So you will know that why a biopsy is important in this case, and why a excision biopsy is not an ideal biopsy in extremity lesions. And incision biopsy is done in cases where the imaging shows that the tumor cannot be excised. Or if you are planning to, if you cannot excise or you cannot salvage, or if it is a metastatic disease, you want a big chunk, then probably you do an incision biopsy. Or the tumor is deep-seated where you think that the core may not be possible, which is usually very, very rare. Incision biopsy is more commonly done in osteosarcoma than in soft tissue sarcomas. Now, the next question is how many cores or pieces should be taken? Residents must be knowing all this. Ajay, how many cores you take?
6 to 8 cores, sir.
6 to 8 cores.
ये सब कहाँ पढ़ा यार तुमने?
Okay. So you should take a good amount of tissue. There is no definite number that how many cores or pieces should be taken. And my next is, in what medium the biopsy should be collected?
Formalin.
Formalin.
10% formalin.
10% formalin. So here is something that you should know when you are dealing with soft tissue sarcomas. The biopsy is collected in 3 different mediums. Because in a soft tissue sarcoma, there are 2 things which are very important. One is cytogenetics, for which the material should be taken in sterile tissue culture vial and tissue culture medium. And some test requires a frozen tissue. So where it should be collected in, especially if you have to do a RNA based test, then in a RNA litter, or it should be taken in a plain vial and frozen beside taking into formalin vial. The formalin vial is basically used for microscopy and immunohistochemistry, which gives you a diagnosis in almost 90% of the cases. But to confirm the diagnosis, the cytogenetics changes has to be defined in soft tissue sarcomas, and it is recommended that tissue culture biopsy should also be taken in a tissue culture medium.
Yes, that is true that formalin needs to be at least minimum 4 cores should be there minimum, so that we generally divide them into 2 blocks, so that one block is available for our immunohistochemical workup, and the other block with 2 cores remaining can be used for further ancillary techniques like cytogenetics, FISH and all. For some tumors like synovial sarcoma, like Ewing sarcoma, we require FISH or karyotyping in some of the cases. So there we can use the remaining cores.
Dr. Karyotyping cannot be done from the formalin
Not
fixation.
karyotyping, sir. We generally go for FISH or like FISH techniques, cytogenetics and all we can do on the formalin
FISH can be
fixation.
done, but normally our practice is to embed all the tissue in a single block. And because all of these patients will require immunohistochemistry.
Absolutely.
Because primarily the soft tissue sarcoma, the first histopathological diagnosis that you get is based on the type of tissue. So you're going
Correct,
to say
sir.
round cell tissues, round cell tumor, spindle cell tumor,
Yes,
or
sir.
large cell tumor. So the initial diagnosis most of the time will be on the cell type, but to know that which connective tissue this is arising from, the immunohistochemistry will be essential. And that is the reason why we normally recommend 6 to 8 cores, because so that some of them require more immunohistochemistry markers to be run, and it is not possible that 1 or 2 markers may be sufficient. So sometimes you may have to run 10 markers or 15 markers before you can actually come down to a diagnosis, depending upon which panel are running. For tissue culture, you have to take in tissue culture medium.
Yes.
Some people do IHC on frozen sections, and if that is the institutional practice, then it should be collected in a plain vial.
Right.
Okay, so this was the CT scan. In this case, only CT scan was done. There was no MRI available. And you can see your vessels here, and the tumor is well capsulated, just lying under the skin. In some part, you can see up to here, you can see the skin, you can see the fat under the skin. But when you come anteriorly, you see that there is no space between the skin or the tumor. So the tumor was infiltrating the skin. So the neurovascular bundle was free. The tumor was lying in the subcutaneous plane. So what metastatic workup would you do? From the CT scan, it looks like an operable tumor. I got one answer, PET scan. Any other?
CCT thorax.
CCT thorax.
Chest X-ray and ultrasound abdomen.
Chest X-ray and ultrasound of the abdomen. Okay.
So CCT thorax, abdomen and pelvis.
CCT thorax, abdomen and pelvis.
Low dose breath hold non-contrast CT.
Non-contrast. Why non-contrast?
So lung nodules can be visualized without contrast. For mediastinal nodes, one needs contrast. Otherwise, in the lung window, we can appreciate the lung nodules.
So why do you require a high resolution CT for that?
No, sir. Just a low dose breath holding non-contrast CT would be good enough, sir.
CT would be good enough. So we have to remember that the commonest site of metastasis is lung, and we have to image the lungs to rule out any metastasis. And the other is CT of the abdomen. Pelvis is not very important here because two organs where you have to rule out metastasis is lung and liver. If your lung and liver is free, you can say that the metastasis is negative. Bone scanning is not much used in soft tissue sarcomas. PET scan, yes, the PET scan is a important investigation, and it has now been seen more and more being used. If we go by DeVita, I don't know the level of evidence, but if we go by the recent edition of DeVita, it says that the PET is more used in evaluating the response of new adjuvant therapies compared to that of the initial assessment. So if you are planning a new adjuvant therapy, then it is important that one should do a PET scan. Otherwise, the PET scans are not normally recommended metastatic workup. So from that, we know that it is a T3 N0 M0 spindle cell sarcoma of neural origin, grade 2. So that makes it a 3A tumor, stage 3A tumor. So the next question obviously will be upfront surgery versus preoperative radiotherapy.
Pre-operative RT will be there first.
So Dr. Ajay says preoperative RT. Anyone who wants to take it out?
Sir, upfront surgery.
So Sandeep says upfront surgery.
So what is the grade?
Grade 2. If it is a T3 tumor, the grade actually doesn't matter. Until unless it's a very low grade. Until unless it's a very low grade tumor.
Pre-op RT, sir.
Dr. Ankita, you want to add?
So there are certain studies. Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible, Ankita.
So there are certain studies which support pre-op RT, but in this particular case, yes, pre-op RT can be offered.
So pre-op RT, considering the grade of the disease, which is G2 spindle cell tumor, size of the tumor, which is again more than 10 centimeters. So very high chances that this patient can get an adjuvant treatment. So considering the results of the Canadian trial, pre-op RT would be preferred.
Sir, upfront surgery. So this tumor is very close to the skin, and there are chances that even during radiation therapy, the skin can necrose, and the patient there may be dehiscence from that. If we see the long term, so there in the Canadian trial that is quoted, we see that around 30% wound complications were there. Secondly, if we see the long-term morbidity, initial results showed that there is difference in the functional outcome, but the long-term outcomes regarding function of the limb, it is not different from between pre-op versus post-op RT.
That's very good answer. So if you look at the data very carefully,
considering the lesion,
yeah.
Yes, sir. Considering the lesion, it is already involving the skin. So probably this patient is going to require wide excision along with skin excision.
Yes.
So if at all we are giving pre-op RT, that affected skin can looking at the scans and clinical picture.
Mm-hmm.
Sir, I wouldn't want a patient to discontinue the RT in between if the skin necrosis occurs, and that is my worry in giving a neoadjuvant RT in this case.
Okay, so this patient underwent a surgery and, as indicated, required a full thickness excision and a flap cover. But I'll tell you that what is the evidence, current evidence on preoperative versus postoperative radiotherapy. There are actually 16 studies, and there is only one randomized control trial that has looked at preoperative versus postoperative RT. And almost all these studies have shown a advantage and better local control with preoperative RT. However, the complication rates are as high as 35% in patients who underwent preoperative RT for extremity and superficial trunk. So the current recommendation is that for extremity and superficial trunk, if the lesion is operable, go ahead and operate and give adjuvant radiotherapy, which also reduces the local recurrence rates and improves the overall survival in all these patients. And this is the clinical trial which has been done, randomized control trial which has been done, and they had 35% wound complication rate in preoperative group compared to 16% in postoperative group. Then there are trials where people are going for different delivery of radiotherapy techniques, trying to reduce the complications. And this IGORT RTOG 630 trial is one of there, where they have used the IGRT to reduce the target volume and reduce the wound-related complications. This particular trial had actually two arms. One arm was a CCRT arm, concurrent chemo RT arm, and the other was radiotherapy alone arm. And because of a high complication rate in patients who were receiving the concurrent chemoradiotherapy, that arm had to be prematurely closed. And data was available only for those patients who underwent IGRT alone. So basically, this trial was designed to compare primary RT versus concurrent chemo RT. But unfortunately, it ended up giving data on only IGRT and how it reduced the complications. Canadian SR2 trial, everybody has talked about. And even in the Canadian SR2 trial, the 30% complication rate was there with the preoperative RT.
Sir, I want to add one more thing to Canadian trial, which everybody quotes. One thing is that Canadian trial, all the patients had received IMRT. So in India, it might not be feasible that all the patients can receive IMRT, and the complications rates may be even higher if you use a conventional technique. That is one thing we have to keep in mind while we interpret these trials and use it in our patient setup.
Very true. Very true. And the dose they have used is 50 gray, and post-operative RT they have used a 60 gray thing. And this is a very interesting study which basically talked about how these trial data and the information which is available is utilized. And they have found that despite knowing this, 75% of their population would receive surgery followed by radiotherapy, and only 1/4 of the patient actually will receive preoperative RT. So this is utilization of preoperative versus postoperative RT, looking at how people are actually treating the patients. So in this study, they included 9,604 patients, and they found that 75% would have undergone a primary surgery followed by adjuvant RT. So we decided that the upfront surgery is better. So anyone who can comment upon intraoperative RT or brachytherapy to combine with the upfront surgery?
Sir, if there is a risk that it may lead to R1 or R2 resection, then in that case we can use intraoperative radiotherapy.
Sir, I would like to differ in this case. intraoperative RT or a brachytherapy would be used in large tumors, high-grade tumors, where I have achieved a R0 resection. In case I have a R2 resection, then my brachytherapy would not be sufficient, and probably I would have to use a combination of external beam as well as brachytherapy, or just if the facilities are not available, then just external beam radiation therapy. So I would use these in high-grade tumors or low-grade tumors which are larger in size, more than 10 centimeters. And if the facilities are available, we can use a IORT intraoperative electron, or we can use through the iridium catheters, which are placed intraoperatively. We can give the radiation after 4 to 5 days once there is some wound healing.
Does the site of tumor also plays a role in choosing intraoperative?
Sir, if the resection bed, the catheters are very close to neurovascular bundles, then one would differ from using brachytherapy, because the chances of damage to these neurovascular bundles would be higher, and it should be a plain surface. Difficult anatomy, like in the pelvis or near the folds, groin folds, it would be difficult to place the leads, and the volume distribution may not be adequate.
That's a very good answer.
Also, in case of low-grade tumors, we can even avoid brachytherapy. So the indications are high-grade tumor, size more than 5 centimeters, deep seated, and the cervical and the away from neurovascular bundles.
Yes.
And the contraindications for it are uneven surfaces, positive margin, positive, or skin is involved. So in this case, if skin is involved, we may have to avoid brachytherapy.
Yeah. So this is from a
Can you please
different.
repeat,
This is
because
a
your
different
voice was
situation.
coming cracked.
This is from a different case where IORT is placed, where the tumor was very close to the bone, and neurovascular bundle is nowhere near in picture. So these are the cases where you may have a shaved margin, and you don't want to take out the cortical bone. You can think in terms of placing the brachytherapy. So what are the evidence for brachytherapy for soft tissue sarcoma? This Pister's MSKCC trial is 1996 trial, compared surgical resection versus use of interstitial brachytherapy. And they found that the local control was almost 13% better in people where interstitial brachytherapy is used. And the brachytherapy use is only recommended for extremity and superficial trunk sarcomas. It is not being done for any deep-seated lesions, as already told. Then there is this European pooled analysis published in 2018 in Annals of Surgical Oncology. They analyzed the data of 259 patients, extremity soft tissue sarcomas that have received intraoperative external beam radiotherapy. And in there, most of these patients, 90% were high-grade lesions, predominantly liposarcomas, and median dose was 12 gray. And if you look at their results, that 70% of resections were R0 and 30% were R1 resections, where they have used the intraoperative radiation. And the margin remained the significant predictor of local recurrence. So if in the patients where the margin was R1 resections, where the margin was positive, these are the patients who actually recurred. Otherwise, in a R0 resection, the intraoperative radiotherapy proved to be a very good tool, and 5-year disease control rate was 69% in their study. So we have discussed 3 options here: upfront surgery with or without intraoperative brachytherapy versus preoperative therapy versus postoperative radiation. So this chart is available in DaVita, and I think anybody who wants or who has access to DaVita can see. This is basically that you have to after the investigations, you have to, after a biopsy, what you look for is the grade of the tumor. If you have a low grade tumor, except for the well differentiated liposarcoma, where a complete excision with intact tumor capsule with 1 millimeter of any margin between 1 millimeter to 1 centimeter is ideal, and no adjuvant is used. For all other sarcoma types, if the negative margin is negative, tumor is low grade, no adjuvant is required. And if the margin is positive, IMRT is given. For high grade tumors, if you look at, Ewing's and rhabdomyosarcomas are taken for neoadjuvant chemotherapy, and all other sarcomas, depending upon their size, these are taken in for preoperative therapies or followed by the full excision, and then postoperative RT is recommended for. If you look at this schematic, the preoperative RT is not being considered anywhere in this particular for extremity and the superficial trunk sarcomas, except when the margin is less than 1 centimeter, microscopic positive margin. So we move to scenario 2, or a retroperitoneal sarcoma. This is a 62-year-old male, swelling in abdomen for more than 6 months. On examination, a 15 into 10 centimeter mass right lumbar region reaching up to umbilicus and RIF, right iliac fossa. So what are the common presentations for a intra-abdominal or retroperitoneal masses? So basically they present with lump abdomen. By the time the lump is palpable to the patient, it is already too big. Or they present with the symptoms which occurs because of pressure onto adjoining organs. So they may present with intestinal obstruction, vomiting, obstipation, constipation, etc., etc., depending upon where they are located. And what is the next that you should be doing? Obviously, imaging. And we have already discussed that for retroperitoneal intra-abdominal, the CT is preferable. CT is preferable. So this is the CT picture. Shows a large tumor located on the right side. And if you look at the image on the right, the kidney can be seen very close to the mass. And in this patient, we had also done an MRI. MRI is also available in this patient. And you can see a huge mass starting just below the lower border of the liver and reaching almost up to the pelvis with very close to the kidney. Though it appears that the plane with the kidney is very well maintained. And
any reasons why MRI was preferred along with the CT in this patient?
See, MRI, most of the retroperitoneal tumors, the possibility of a liposarcoma is very high. And liposarcoma has a characteristic MRI feature. So the lipomatous tissue becomes black when they are saturated, fat saturation is done. So a fatty component stands out on MRI, which does not stand out on a CT scan. And the management strategy for a liposarcoma differs from other sarcomas. And that is why to segregate whether you are dealing with a liposarcoma or any other type of sarcoma, a MRI sometimes helps. That is one of the reasons.
Dr. Manoj?
Yeah.
Dr. Rahul Khanna here.
Yes, Rahul boss.
I noticed that the kidney is pushed anteriorly in this patient.
Yes.
And although the kidney is free, but we must be concerned about the renal vessels, especially the renal vein. Even if it is not involved, it is at great risk of injury during the removal of this tumor, because it is very big tumor and exposure will be a problem. So we should be very concerned about the renal vessels, especially the renal vein being not damaged during the excision process.
Yes, if the kidney is there, and you have to look at all the vasculatures, the renal vein, the adrenal vein, the position of the adrenal also has to be specified before planning resection. And if we see the image here, it's pushed anteriorly and it's pushed medially. So anterior medial displacement is there. Renal vein is not seen in this cut, and we have the cuts where renal vein is seen. Renal vein and renal vessels were free.
Manoj, can I comment?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we have got maybe 2 cases where we did a auto transplant on table.
For kidney.
So we removed the whole, first we called the renal transplant team, and they immediately divided the renal vein. We did not do the both, only renal vein. Then we lifted the kidney, we did the complete resection, then again vein was reconstructed. So that also might be a possibility. Sometimes you have to keep in mind, if in your city NGO or in your MR NGO you feel that it is completely aborting or maybe 3/4 encasing the renal vessel, so you should always keep a standby transplant team during the procedure.
Yes, a partial nephrectomy is also an option.
No, a partial nephrectomy is definitely option whenever gerote is involved. But if it is invading the medially to the hilum, then the vessel is to be divided to take out the whole thing, then again reconstructed actually.
Yes. So the question here for the PGs is, would you do a tissue diagnosis or would you not do a tissue diagnosis here?
No need.
So we have one answer, no need.
No need. No need.
No need.
Radiological diagnosis.
If we are suspecting other diagnosis like germ cell tumor, lymphoma, then biopsy may be needed. But in this case, not needed, sir.
So this is one of the differences from the extremity sarcomas, that in an extremity sarcoma, a biopsy is a must before planning the treatment. In a retroperitoneal sarcoma, if it is operable, you don't require a biopsy. You require a biopsy only if you are not considering surgical treatment. So if you plan for a preoperative chemotherapy or a RT, then only you require a biopsy. Otherwise, you don't require a biopsy. Or you require a biopsy if you are considering a germ cell tumor or a lymphoma as a differential diagnosis. So if you are sure that it is a soft tissue sarcoma arising from the soft tissue, here no tissue diagnosis preoperatively is required. But the question here remains that either you should do for an upfront surgery, go for preoperative RT versus preoperative chemotherapy, or surgery with IORT.
Sir, no role of pre-op RT. We have the UK trial published in 2019, which failed to show any benefit of preoperative RT. Second, intraoperative RT, yes, if the facilities are available, it can be beneficial because you can shield the organs during surgery. Pre-op chemotherapy, again, sir, we don't have any evidence to support pre-op chemotherapy in a resectable tumor.
Yes, so the only evidence that we have is from the retrospective studies mainly, that a preoperative RT sometimes works, or the local control rates are better with preoperative RT in retroperitoneal tumors. And retroperitoneal tumors are the only place where a preoperative RT has shown a benefit compared to the postoperative RT.
Manoj, if you are planning pre-op RT or CT, I think tissue diagnosis is a must.
Yes, sir.
So I have a query.
Yeah.
So I have a query.
Yeah.
If only on the imaging, how do we know that this is not a germ cell tumor and a lymphoma? And in that case, in all the retroperitoneal tumor, do you think that we should do tumor markers for the germ cell tumor? That is the question. Because without biopsy, we won't come to know. So is there a harm in doing biopsy because there is no tumor seeding and nothing, maybe we can still come to know, confirm and go ahead with the surgery?
Basically, the germ cell tumor and lymphomas are suspected in tumors which are located more medial and which can be confused with the lymph nodes, or paraiotic or retroperitoneal lymph nodes. For tumors which are located laterally, like this tumor is located behind the kidney. Now there are no lymph node groups in this area behind the kidney. The tumor is pushing the kidney anteriorly and medially. So the tumor is located lateral and posterior to the kidney. That's an area where there are no lymph nodes stations present. The other place where a germ cell tumor can have a retroperitoneal mass is in undescended testis. And if both the testes are present in the genitalia in their respective places, then this mass, the possibility of mass being an undescended testis is low. And in cases of undescended testis, the mass has to be in the path of the descent of testis. So
Manoj, can I make a comment?
Yeah, sure, Rudra.
So the best thing is that in your pre-operative planning, you always send all the tumor markers.
Yes.
So that will guide you. So it is not that out of a blue moon that it will come out germ cell tumor. It has to be corroborated with the tumor markers in the pre-operative assessment. If there is some point where you feel that some of the markers are high, then definitely you can go for it. But for a sarcoma, radiologically, the diagnosis is so sure that the radiology feels that almost 95% accuracy radiologically. So we have never confronted with such type of problem. But another thing is most important in such type of tumors is that why we are preferring preoperative or intraoperative radiotherapy, why not post-operative? Because for the simple reason, same as rectum. When you take out the rectum, the pelvis is empty and whole of the small intestine goes to the pelvis. And when you give post-operative adjuvant RT, you will be only radiating the small intestine rather than the actual tumor bed. And the same thing happens with the retroperitoneal sarcoma. Whole small bowel, after you remove it, it acts like a tissue expander. And when you take out it, all the small intestine will go to that quadrant. And when you do a adjuvant RT, you will be only radiating the intestine. So it is better if you have in doubt that this patient needs radiotherapy, it has to be either pre-op or IORT. It should not be adjuvant. But if by any chance you have to give, then it's a different story. But if your proper planning is there, then either it has to be pre-op or IORT.
Agree with you, Rudra. Absolutely agree. So, new adjuvant chemotherapy, just one word. That there are, yeah, Chandra.
Yeah. So I think what Rudra is now, I think the who are the beneficiaries of a discussion you have to define. If you are discussing for PGs, I think what points Rudra is saying may not be applicable to them. Because he said about the vascular resection in case with a transplant team, and he also is saying about IORT. But I don't think the intraoperative RT is widely practiced in US and in big centers. When I went for a training, it was there everywhere. But unfortunately, if you look at even US across centers in many places, the evidence which is coming up for intraoperative RT is not that great. But if you are, I know, in a discussion where mostly PGs are listening, you better stick to basic rather than going to unnecessary discussion. And what you rightly pointed out, going ahead with the surgical resection without a biopsy and retroperitoneal sarcomas is perfect. And only when you have a diagnosis, you have some other dilemmas like GCTs or lymphomas, then you need to have a tumor markers or biopsy. So please specify your audience and keep the discussion within that.
Yeah, Chandrabani is right. You always have an option of taking out the kidney. You have an option of leaving behind the kidney. Yeah. You have an option of partially removing the kidney. You have an option of transplanting the kidney.
Yeah, Manoj, but if you sit in an exam and the candidate is saying that I will do a transplantation or sort of things, it may not be acceptable. But we want a candidate who is well aware of the risk to the kidney and who is able to rescue the kidney, take care of it. And at the worst case, he can he should also get a consent for a nephrectomy. So, of course, if you have a better transplant team, he can bring them and make use of them also. That should be the last option. But if the PG, they have to look into perspective.
Chandramon accepted.
True. So let's talk about chemotherapy. There are no... Yeah.
Dr. Manoj?
Yeah.
Regarding the nephrectomy part, there are two situations actually. One is the planned nephrectomy that preoperatively somebody has planned that this tumor excision will require a nephrectomy. That will be when the preoperative encasement of the renal vessels or loss of plane between the kidney and the tumor has been found. But what is more likely clinical situation is it is an unplanned nephrectomy that the excision of the tumor is proceeding and suddenly the surgeon realizes that the renal vessel has been transected, and that time the nephrectomy is unplanned nephrectomy. It's not something which was preoperatively decided upon. So that is a more common clinical scenario.
Agree with you, sir. And apart from vascular involvement, sometimes you may find that the kidney is encased in the tumor. You may not be able to separate it out at the time of surgery, and you may decide to take it out with the tumor. That possibility is always there, because the priority is to get a R0 resection. The priority here is not to save the kidney. The priority is to do an R0 resection.
Manoj, can I tell about a study we done here in medical college?
Yeah.
So one of our PGs, medical college, he analyzed 100 cases of retroperitoneal tumors with nephrectomy done. And unfortunately, in majority of them, more than 95% of them are not actually invading the kidney. But even then, whatever said and done, there is no foolproof way of taking away the entire disease, which may be infiltrating the perirenal fat, may not be actually kidney, without a nephrectomy. So I think nephrectomy should be liberally done in case of sarcoma surgeries to get an obtained margin, whether kidney is actually invaded or not.
Yeah, so the aim of surgery is to get an R0 resection, which is very important. Don't leave any disease behind.
Dr. Manoj, like in the CT scan that you showed,
yeah,
the renal vessels are not in the anatomical location. That is the most important thing. They're so anteriorly pushed that the surgeon is not anticipating the renal vessel to be present there.
Yes.
And because the renal vein is so much stretched, it is actually empty of blood. There's no blood in the renal vein because of its stretching effect of the tumor behind that.
Yes.
And the surgeon might not recognize the renal vessel at all till it has been transected. Because it is actually empty because of the stretching effect, and it is not in its normal anatomical location. It is pushed very anteriorly, where the surgeon is not anticipating it to be present.
So we move to neoadjuvant therapy. So if we look at the neoadjuvant therapy versus surgery, there are no clinical trials which has been done head-to-head. And there are no clinical trials of neoadjuvant chemotherapy versus neoadjuvant radiotherapy. So whatever data we have is from the retrospective studies. And this ISG STS 1001 was one such study that tailored the neoadjuvant chemotherapy by the histological types. And they also failed to find any benefit of neoadjuvant chemotherapy compared to the standard chemotherapy arm. So basically the treatment protocol that is recommended is for a stage 1 or 2 tumors, good local control with surgery and selective use of adjuvant radiotherapy, which is being recommended. Radiotherapy is mostly used for grade 2 tumors sometimes, or the larger tumors. And for stage 3, which most of us will be seeing in our clinical practice, good local control with surgery, with radiotherapy. In retroperitoneal sarcoma, it is recommended to use preoperative radiotherapy. In extremity sarcomas, it is recommended to use postoperative adjuvant radiotherapy. And adjuvant chemotherapy is also used for young people who had good performance status. Stage 4 we can leave out. So the question is, does all cases require adjuvant therapy? So what are the factors which predict the use of adjuvant radiotherapy, or what are the predictors of survival in cases of soft tissue sarcomas?
So I think the chemotherapy is one thing which have not proven to prolong survival as they really expected. But even then, if it is a high-grade tumor, a big tumor, and of course there are certain histological types like round cell tumor and Ewing's, as well as the rhabdomyosarcoma, where chemotherapy has a very good role. Otherwise, I think we restrict the chemotherapy for only big tumors with high grade, with of course doubtful increase in survival.
So basically, there is a list of prognostic factors here which determines the adjuvant therapy. One is the anatomical site. Size is a big criteria. Then depth of the tumor, where the tumor is superficial or deep. Superficial tumors do not usually require adjuvant. Deep tumors usually require adjuvant. Invasion of adjoining organs require adjuvant. If a surgical margin is positive, usually requires adjuvant. And despite adjuvant fails. So that also you have to remember that even if you give adjuvant, the chances of failure are higher. Then high the grade, adjuvant is required. Then the type of tumor, Chandramohan has already informed, the Ewing's, the GIST, the synovial sarcomas require adjuvant chemotherapy. The tumor hypoxia, nodal spread, metastasis, molecular factor, and associated syndromes. Soft tissue sarcoma is one of the components with Lynch syndrome, where P53 is mutated, and it is also also present in neurofibromatosis, NF1 syndrome. So if these two syndromes are present, then special care has to be taken, because the recurrence rates and overall survival is poor in these two situations. There have been trials, some have shown improved overall survival, but most of them showed no difference in survival. So for a retroperitoneal sarcoma, again, this chart is there given in the DVITA. So anybody wants, they can go through this chart from the DVITA. Should I proceed to the third scenario, or shall we discuss it sometimes else?
Proceed.
Continue.
Okay, so third scenario that I'm taking today is a recurrent soft tissue sarcoma. This is another scenario that most of us Indian surgeons will come across. Most of these patients have a lump, see the local surgeon who simply excise it, and most of these patients come back 3 or 4 years later, or maybe 6 months later, with a recurrent swellings, recurrences, local recurrences, like this man who has in the arm. So when you are dealing with a recurrent soft tissue sarcoma, the question is again the same: shall we go for an upfront surgery, or you should use any of the new adjuvant therapies? Rudra, you want to take up?
I think ideal is after the MRI assessment, if you feel that you can do any type of conservation, then only neoadjuvant is required. Otherwise, if it is a simple amputation or something, after doing a proper whole body screening like whole body PET CT, if you don't find anywhere any metastasis, you can go for upfront amputation and give adjuvant. But if you have any chance of doing a limb conservation, even in a recurrent setting, then ideally it should be neoadjuvant.
I think one more point to be mentioned. Is the recurrence happening after radiotherapy and chemotherapy? Then you go for upfront surgery rather than repeating the same mistake again.
Correct.
If you have radio knife, then you can take the call.
Yeah.
So basically, Rudra, the dictum is that a recurrent soft tissue sarcoma is treated just like a primary soft tissue sarcoma would have been treated.
Correct.
The only difference is the situation where an adjuvant RT has been given after the first surgery. So that is the only situation where one has to take a call to re-radiate or not to re-radiate. It is difficult to treat and more likely to recur. So soft tissue sarcomas which are recurrent are difficult to treat and more likely to recur because of prior contamination of tissue plane as well as intrinsically aggressive tumor biology. Now, salvage is almost all time possible, like Rudra has said and Chandramohan has said, 99% of the time, the recurrent soft tissue sarcoma is salvageable. The only thing is that sometimes you may be able to salvage the limb or may not be able to salvage the limb, but the patient can be salvaged. So the survival is good in recurrent soft tissue sarcomas as well, because recurrences are not usually impacting the long-term survival. The important factor in outcome is the size and timing of recurrence. The recurrences which occurs early are more likely to fail again. The recurrences which come late are more likely to do better. So smaller size, slow growth has better survival, and limb conservation should be tried as much as possible. So the first priority is to save the life of the patient, and the second priority is to save the limb. So only in conditions where the limb cannot be saved, only amputation should be done. Otherwise, on all other attempts should be made to save the limb. And if that requires giving new adjuvant therapies, they should be given. Now, surgery is a little difficult or rather typical here. In a normal surgery that you do upfront, you remove all the palpable tumor with the needle track. What happens here is that you have to remove all the palpable tumor, you have to remove the previous scar, and also you have to take out all the potential focus where you think the first surgeon would have entered. So all those things also, even though they are normal, they are not visible, they should be taken out. So whatever planes the first surgeon has entered, all those planes has to be taken out.
Sir,
So,
is there a role of frozen section in this scenario of the normal seaming areas?
even if they are negative, they have to be removed, Anshita. Because you can't take a chance. How many frozen sections and from how many places are you going to take? So it is a dictum that you take out everything. And that is why in most of the recurrent soft tissue sarcomas, a compartmental excision or a modified compartmental excision is much better than a wide excision alone. So radiotherapy is used only when it is not been considered previously. And re-radiation is possible but can have serious consequences. And there is very limited data of re-radiation in recurrent soft tissue sarcoma or even radiation in soft tissue sarcoma. I looked at the PubMed, came across just 2 or 3 articles which talked about radiation in recurrent soft tissue sarcoma, or only one article with 62 cases for re-radiation in soft tissue sarcoma. And all of them have shown a very high complication rate to the tune of 40-45% in re-radiation with the soft tissue sarcomas. Then there are new agents which are coming up. I'll be ending with a couple of slides. Olatumab is now approved for soft tissue sarcoma. Trabectedin has been approved for soft tissue sarcoma. Pazopanib, bevacizumab, and mTOR inhibitors, they have all been approved for soft tissue sarcoma. And there is some amount of evidence available that these work in some specified situations. I'm not going to in details of those situations. Sutinib with radiation has been used. This is a phase 1 trial which is published in 2016. And Pazopanib has been used in a phase 2 trial. The phase 3 trials are ongoing, and we probably will have more evidence in the days to come. So I think we stop now, Rudra, if you permit. And probably we may discuss the metastatic soft tissue sarcoma some other time.
Sir, is isolated limb perfusion in this extremity tumor?
Isolated limb perfusion is being used in select cases of extremity sarcomas. So it is not something which is recommended for almost all cases. but there is very limited evidence on use of isolated limb perfusion in soft tissue sarcomas. Not much evidence to support that it should be done.
Mostly indication is melanoma, but sometimes used.
It is done in soft tissue sarcomas also, and there are a few studies which have shown benefit, but it is not something which is available in the guidelines, and it is not recommended to be used regularly.
Okay, Manoj, good discussion.
So I have a query.
Yeah.
The previous second case, retroperitoneal tumor, the tumor was very close to the kidney and it was stretching.
Yeah.
So is in that case, looking that it was very difficult, and there is a coming up evidence of abdominal compartment excision. Is it safe to say that we can go ahead with the straightforward in that case?
Definitely.
Hello.
Yeah, you got your answer. Definitely.
Yes, sir. Yeah. And sir, could you please explain about this modified compartment excision for the limb for recurrent soft tissue sarcoma? Compartment excision we know, but modified compartment excision.
Modified compartment excision is always is also given where the modified. It is basically a modification. Modification in the sense that either you remove more than the compartment or you remove less than the compartment. It becomes a modified compartmental excision. It's
So
usually,
how does it differ from the wide excision then?
it differs from the wide excision because you take the margins you take here is much at least the X and Y margins are much more than what you would have taken in the wide excision. Because in the wide excision, you maximum margin that you want to take is 1 centimeter. Here, at least at 2 places, your margin will be more than 5 centimeters. Depth of invasion, the Z margin, you have no control over, because there is a limitation to the depth or the Z margin that you can excise. But as far as the X and Y margin is concerned, you can always go beyond the compartment sometimes.
Yes, sir. So, and is there a role of a patient, if a patient who has a recurrence after 2 years post irradiation,
yeah,
is there a role of using brachytherapy? I know you said re-irradiation is no good, but the patient is having a recurrence after 2 years. In that case, is it possible to use brachytherapy in that case for the upper surgery?
I think brachytherapy can be tried because the dose to the tumor bed that you deliver through a brachytherapy is 10 to 12 gray, not more than that. If Ankita is here, I think she can answer this question.
Sir, I have no clinical experience with brachytherapy.
Okay. But usually,
can I answer, Manoj?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, actually, IORT is nothing but you put the wires, and either you take sometimes you take the patient to the brachy-OT, to the radiotherapy, and put the directly IORT on a single day. The other thing is that for a brachy, you put the wires during the surgery along with the surgeon, and after that the surgeon closes, and for 5 days or 3 days, the brachy is given in the brachy-OT. Okay, so I think for recurrent tumors, brachy is a very good option actually, because re-radiation is a big problem. But there is a caveat. If the tumor is more superficial, brachy is not, you cannot place the wires. The tumor has to be in depth, plus it has to be away from the neurovascular bundles. So in both cases, if you get a place where both things are not there, then only the brachy wires can be put.
Rudra, the thing here is that if the radiation has already been given, and we assume that it will be adjuvant radiation, so about 60 gray would have been given. When we use brachytherapy, we use approximately 10 gray.
Less actually.
We use less. And depending upon what was the previous treatment contouring and how much.
Plus, DFS is also important. How much duration between the first radiotherapy
She
and
said
now?
2 years. She said 2 years.
2 years is good enough. Actually.
And
To give
and intraoperative RT, what we use is 25 gray.
25. Yeah.
25 gray. So the dose will become 85 gray if we use intraoperative RT versus 70 gray if we use the brachytherapy. But I think the decision finally has to be taken by the radiation oncologist.
Correct.
It's his call. He has to see the
So,
previous charts. He has to see
radiation
previous
to be
charts and
given to
decide.
volume. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions?
So, yeah, coming to the retroperitoneal sarcomas, is preoperative RT histology driven, or if we have removed the tumor well encapsulated and completely removed, then in that case we may not give. So, which are the ideal candidates you will consider for preoperative radiation therapy in retroperitoneal sarcomas?
See, there is no histopathology when you go in for surgery. So surgeon has to take a call that whether he is going to operate or he is not going to operate. That's the first.
Correct.
So in a operable retroperitoneal sarcomas, there is no neoadjuvant RT because there is no biopsy. You don't know the histopathological type. You just go in and take it out. So in cases which are borderline operable or considered inoperable, where a biopsy is available, the chemosensitive ones goes for chemotherapy, like Ewing sarcomas, synovial sarcomas, or the GIST. They will go for chemotherapy, and rest of them will go for neoadjuvant RT, and then you reassess for surgery.
So what is the dose of neoadjuvant RT in that case in your retroperitoneal sarcoma?
I don't know. Ankita may be able to tell. I think it is 45 grays.
Rashmi is also there. Rashmi can respond.
Yeah, Rashmi can respond if Rashmi is there.
Yeah, audible.
45 to 50 gray. Yeah, that's what I assume. It is less than the adjuvant dose.
So it is not audible. Could you please repeat what she said about the recurrent STS?
Rashmi, you had to go close to your mic.
Issue with my audio. But
Yeah, I know.
what I am saying in recurrent cases, Brachy is a very good option because in Brachy there is a very sharp dose fall. So whatever we are giving, just within a few millimeters, the dose goes up to 0. But it is not achieved with IMRT or external beam RT. So Brachy is a very good option if the neurovascular bundle is not close to that, skin is free.
Yes, we agree with you, Rashmi, that the IORT is not a good option. IORT is not a good option, and brachytherapy is a better option because the dose beyond 5 millimeter is 0.
0.
Is that
Correct.
right?
Correct.
So 5 millimeter all around in 360 degrees is all that you get.
Whatever the target, the catheter we are putting within 5 mm to 1 mm, the dose drops to 0. So there
Yes.
is the bone, the vessels.
Yeah. And so we also have to remember that the maximum area that can be radiated is 5 millimeter beyond the catheter.
Correct.
Any other questions?
IORT with the suspected it is the R1 resection. So IORT is very good that we are giving around 10 to 12 gray on the same day, as well as we are just removing the normal tissue like the vessels and everything. We are just retracting it, putting the gauge piece there so that we can take away our normal organs from the target, and we are just delivering a 10 to 12 gray single fraction, and total equivalent dose become 18 to 25 gray. So that is the advantage of IORT, that we are giving a high dose radiation to a very focused area, minimizing the dose to the normal organs, and with a single shot and a good modality, but it is very hard working and very so many things we have to incorporate to that. But in our institution, we are regularly doing IORT for like sarcomas as well as recurrent rectum. We recently have given to the recurrent nodal recurrence in head and neck cancer, and still add IORT to the nodal recurrence, 12 gray, and rest of the 45 gray with external RT, and the patient came 1 month back with 8 months of follow-up, and it is completely disease-free on 20. So we are practicing IORT more frequently.
Yes.
Mostly in recurrent cases like head and neck, rectum. So we did till now, from last 7 years, we did around 13 to 14 cases like that.
Thank you, Rashmi. Yeah.
Good.
Good.
Sir, may I ask you one question, sir?
Yeah, please.
Sir, in the first scenario, that upper thigh soft tissue sarcoma, it appears to be deep-seated. The preferred imaging of MRI, my doubt is whether it is with contrast or without contrast, because it was close to the vessels which are found in MRI. So, does the contrast help in this patient? Contrast MRI.
See, most of the time at T1, T2 weighted images with the special techniques are sufficient for delineation of soft tissue sarcomas. But if you want to delineate the vessels, an MR angiography is a very good tool. It is actually a more sensitive tool than the CT angiography, especially in the limbs.
Sir, another question, sir. When do we recommend surgery in stage 4 disease for extremity sarcoma, sir?
Stage 4 is a metastatic disease. We don't recommend surgery at all. And if surgery is done, it is basically palliative surgery.
Palliative.
Yeah. So if you have a large fungating tumor, you have a bleeding, you can address the primary tumor. Otherwise, the primary tumor is not addressed.
Another last question, sir.
One question.
Intraoperative rupture of retroperitoneal sarcoma, sir. So actually, how manage intraoperatively? Do we prefer any adjuvant treatment for this kind of patients?
Rudra, you want to take up intraoperative rupture, retroperitoneal or intra-abdominal tumor rupture?
So if you see, ideally you should handle it properly, and it should not rupture. That is the first criteria. Okay, but if there is a spillage, then you are in a mess actually. To be frank, so definitely it needs a lot of patience to do complete removal, because once you break the capsule, the chances of getting a R0 is very difficult, and it always ruptures when R0 is not possible. So in that scenario, partial excision, leaving the tumor, then putting tips for later on radiotherapy, lot of problems. And intraoperatively, you should do completely good lavage with saline and betadine if possible. And ideally, it should not rupture, because if it ruptures, then there are a lot of neovascularization, and the chances of having bleeding is more. So it is better to have a go slow during the surgery, and do the vascular ligations, feeding vessels, because as the previous question was there, that is related, that you should always have a MR angio to identify the feeding vessels. If you identify the feeding vessels and tie from the beginning, then after that, when you try to remove, the chances of rupture or incomplete removal are less. It is only when you try to remove the tumor and you have not identified or ligated the feeding vessel and it starts bleeding, then you start doing haphazard work and you ultimately land up in R1 or R2 resection, and somehow you manage the bleeding. So ideally, all the planning should start from the radiology room. Then you will never land up in a such type of situation. It is better to not to have such type of situation rather than have it and then manage.
That's true. If there is a rupture of the tumor, the chances of local recurrence are high, and even the overall survival is altered because the possibility of a distant meta also increases.
And even the tumor might implant on the
Other peritoneal
incision through
surfaces.
through peritoneal surfaces, through the incision site. Anything can happen.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Any other questions? Yeah, Rashmi. Come closer. Come closer. Yeah.
One thing I want to add in imaging, whether we are doing the MRI, we generally prescribe the whole length of the bone as well as including the adjacent joint also in imaging.
Right.
Am I audible, sir?
Yeah.
Whole length of the bone should be included in imaging as well as the adjacent full joint should be included in imaging.
Joint above, and joint below.
Correct.
That's a dictum.
So coming to the last one. Coming to the first scenario, you did a wide excision of the sarcoma. So how was it covered?
I used a TFL, tensor fascia lata. TFL with the skin.
So for the first case, which other flap can be used apart from TFL?
Free flaps?
Free flaps. And if we have to use in the brachy in that case, can we go ahead with a free flap and brachy?
You can definitely. Tensor fascia lata is a very thin flap.
Hello.
Because it's a fasciocutaneous flap. It does not have any muscle.
Okay.
And for the groin, what you can do is if you need a thicker cover and you want to do
changes in the flap.
Hello. And if you want to do a thicker flap, even a rectus abdominis can be done. A tram can be done. Superiorly based rectus abdominis, inferiorly based rectus abdominis can be done. If you need a thicker pedicle flap and you don't want to do a free flap.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, there was a doubt in extremity tumors. If the margin turns out to be positive or closed, do we go for re-excision?
Normally, we don't advise re-excision. There is no evidence that re-excision is going to help you, unlike like it does in breast. If your margin is positive, the chances of local recurrence is high. Just keep your patients in close follow-up and excise it as soon as it occurs. So I think it's going to be close to 8 o'clock, and with everybody's permission, shall we close this session? Thanks everybody for their participation.
Thank you.
And if you like it, probably we can have more sessions on more case-based discussions.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Please do give me your feedback.